Hello, I'm Middlesex District Attorney Marian. Thank you for turning in to Middlesex Updates. Today we're going to be talking about teenage dating and healthy relationships. And that is in part because February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. And in recognition of that, we this month announced an app that we've created, which is an educational tool for teenagers and their parents to use to learn about safe and healthy dating practices. That app, which is Healthy Heart Matters, was debuted earlier this month at the Boys and Girls Club of Stoneham and Wakefield. The app was designed by members of our Teen Task Force, which is a group of teenagers from high schools across Middlesex County who've come together to really help us talk about some of the things that we're seeing in our cases and, most importantly, how to do some prevention work on those issues. The nicest thing about this app, which you can easily go on at the App Store, it's free, and look at, is that it was developed by teenagers for teenagers. So it really is a reflection of what they've been seeing either in their own relationships or, unfortunately, in the relationships of their friends. This is a topic that is often hard to get kids to talk about too much. It's hard for parents and family members to even think about. But as district attorney, I've had the tragic opportunity to see a number of these cases where violence developed in a relationship and was not addressed until there was some tragic consequences. And what we don't realize is that this happens so much more than we know. We know that self-reported, 1 in 10 teenagers finds themselves in that kind of a relationship. It cuts across every demographic, and it takes lots of different forms, whether it's what we probably first think about, which is physical violence, but it also includes emotional, sexual, digital, many, many different types of things that happen. And we know that in any relationship, regardless of age, the impact of being hurt by someone you've trusted can last for years. That's especially true when it happens with teenagers, where these may be among the first of their relationships. It's difficult to navigate those relationships in the best of circumstances, but when the overlay is of this kind of violence or controlling behavior that's going on, it's just so much, much harder for teenagers to figure out, first of all, what should be happening, and then what to do if that's not what's happening in their relationship. There's also the piece that many of these kinds of behavior, particularly as they relate to the social media behavior, are things that, in our media and our music have become somewhat normalized for kids. So part of that discussion has to involve really looking at what does a healthy relationship consist of, and what is the problem with some of these things. And that's what's great about this app, is the scenarios that the person using the app goes through are things that actually came from their kids. And they are designed to help people take a look at their own relationship, really take a step back and think about the things that are occurring there and see whether those are contributing to what we want in a healthy relationship. And in part, as I mentioned, one of the greatest things is it's kids talking to kids. And that's important because we know that of those kids who find themselves in a violent dating relationship, only about 1/3 of them ever report. And of those who do report it, the vast majority of it report it to their friends. So our hope is that this app both educates the teenagers who look at it about their own relationships. It empowers their friends, if a friend confides in them, to have a better sense, number one, of what should not be occurring in a relationship, and number two, what kind of resources are out there for people. And third hope is that taking a look at this app will spark the kind of conversations that we hope are happening at the dinner table, in the car, between parents and kids. And looking at this topic today from a variety of perspectives, I'm very happy to have joining us on my left Eliza Hopkins, from the Community Service Coordinator at Respond, which has been a wonderful partner to us, and Joey D'Alessandro, who's the Teen Director at the Boys and Girls Club of Stoneham and Wakefield, another great partner in, as I mentioned, where we rolled out our app. So before we get into the topics, I'd like to give each of you a few minutes to tell our viewers about what you've been doing and what groups your organization serves. So Eliza, if we can start with you.
Of course. So Respond, our mission is to prevent domestic violence, dating and relationship violence, and to respond in the moment to those crises. So some of the things that we do, we work with people across all demographics because, as you said, relationship violence affects everyone, all different ages, backgrounds. And so we offer a variety of different resources, like our 24-hour hotline, which is staffed always by a trained domestic violence counselor. So you're speaking with a human when you're calling in. We offer case management, individual counseling, support groups, really things to create community among survivors, and then also providing educational pieces too, doing outreach in schools, connecting with communities through different organizations.
Thank you. And Joey, I'm not sure, as I mentioned, we debuted this at the Boys and Girls Clubs, but I'm not sure when people hear about the Boys and Girls Club, they're always thinking about your interest in these kind of topics. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, we have kids, we serve kids obviously in multiple communities, and I personally work with kids who are grades 7th grade to 12th. So, there's a lot of different things that we try to focus on, and, we have focus groups, different things like that, leadership activities, and there's a multitude of different topics that come up. And, this app really shines some light on, some of the, the things that go on, teenagers and, different relationships that they may have and are forming. When I was in 7th grade, I was worried about who John Cena was facing in his WWE match, and the kids that these kids things that these kids are going through on a daily basis, especially with relationships, is on a new level. And this app has been great so far. We downloaded this app about a week and a half before the launch party to get our kids acclimated with it, and they used it right up until the event and have been using it ever since. We've since started a focus group going just based off this app and getting feedback from the kids, and they love it. It's been a real tool. So.
I've been at the club lots of times and been there after school when you have the kids tumbling in. And tell us just a little bit about what you hear from the kids in the day-to-day about relationships. Like, aside from the app, what kind of questions do they bring to you about where they're finding themselves?
Everything. So, from, what they can expect to find in relationships, and keep in mind, this is, I'm getting these questions from 7th graders, 8th graders, and just kind of getting their feet wet and, trying to figure out, what they do like, what they don't like, and, it's a lot of figuring out what they're supposed to do in a relationship, calling, 24/7 text messages, are you supposed to talk all day long? Is it okay if you go an hour without speaking to one another? It's a little bit of everything. It's just them essentially asking what to do.
Now, Eliza, obviously Respond deals with clients of all ages, but for kids that, as Joey's talking about, are 7th grade, 8th grade, having sort of their first relationships, how important is it for them going into those relationships to have a real understanding, first of all, of what is healthy and what boundaries they should be setting in relationships?
It's incredibly, incredibly important. The statistics are really high. So 1 in 3 teenagers, by the time they graduate high school, will experience some sort of physical or sexual violence in a dating relationship. And young women who are ages 18 to 24 are more than twice the national average at risk of intimate partner violence. So with that, young people are learning how to be adults, starting from very young ages. And so if you think that unhealthy relationships and unhealthy behaviors are normal, those are going to carry on way into adulthood, which will cause other issues for them, for their families, communities, way down the line. So it's important to identify what those healthy behaviors are, maintaining boundaries, communicating, respecting privacy. Those are all important, but also it's important to identify those in your partner. That can be really challenging. If you just hear what what is communication? What does that look like in your particular relationship? Second, you also have to find ways to assert yourself in the relationship. And that can be really difficult for adults, But then especially in your first relationship, that's going to be really difficult. And then finding ways to not just demand that of your partner, but then also to enact those healthy behaviors yourself. Which if you're only receiving toxic behaviors from your partner, it's going to be really challenging to be able to model that yourself.
Now, one of the things that we know is that some of the signs that someone might be finding themselves in this kind of a relationship is they're withdrawn, they may be very moody, they may not want to engage in conversation. All of the things that also can be teenage indicators. Right. So for parents or family members, what are the signs they should be looking for and be concerned about in their kids? Mm-hmm. And it's for friends as well. Yeah,
for sure. So overall, at Respond, we like to define relationship violence as really coming down to two things: power and control. So it's a pattern of abusive behaviors that happens over time where one partner is consistently and intentionally exerting power and control over the other partner. And so that can look different from the inside, from a teen's perspective, and then also from the outside, from a friend's or family members or teacher's perspective. So some of the signs, like you said, are being kind of more withdrawn from the teen's perspective, feeling kind of put down or belittled, maybe feeling guilty that they're not texting as much, or they don't really feel comfortable in the relationship and maybe aren't able to put a finger on it. But another piece is jealousy, kind of feeling like their partner is constantly jealous or keeping tabs on them, that there's some sort of like an unhealthy power dynamic there. From the outside, it can be a little bit trickier, as you said, but some of the warning signs are the teen becoming more withdrawn, maybe changing their habits or behaviors, oftentimes like minimizing or denying that their partner's behaviors are abusive or even unhealthy. So that's something to definitely look at. And then also watching whether, if you're able to see kind of the two people interact, whether the abusive partner is kind of out loud putting down the person, or if you see any sort of like negative dynamics there.
And what about the things that, again, we might write off to being a teenager, but the being up all night, the keeping on, constantly texting, the need to, more than the rest of us, right, to constantly get to that phone and not miss a message or a text.
Yeah, in an unhealthy relationship, there can be guilt. The partner can feel guilty if they're not communicating with their abusive partner enough. And so, yeah, the constant communication, keeping tabs, one person checking the other person's social media or emails or phone without their permission, that's a huge invasion of privacy. And that's one of the things that's actually really difficult for kids to understand in general, because everything's on the internet, everyone shares their passwords to their phones. But if that thing is kind of consistent, and again, like it's happening over time, and one person is consistently having more power and control over the other, that is definitely a warning sign.
So Joey, one of the things that was great about this app was we had students, especially the students from Greater Lowell Technical High School, help us do the actual mechanics of creating the app. And and one of the things that we heard from the kids was that there were no other more effective ways really to communicate with the kids. They're not reading brochures, they're not doing that sort of thing. They're getting all their information off their devices. For instance, they told us that whatever the answers were to the questions, we needed to keep it to one screen because people don't scroll down. That's it. That's how much information they take in. Is that consistent with what you see of use of devices? I know you try to minimize that at the club.
Yeah, so it's definitely, screen time is a big, issue, essentially. It's a big issue that we deal with at the Boys and Girls Club. We try to keep the kids as active as possible, but the truth of the matter is these kids are glued to their phones 24/7. We have relationship changes within a day. Like, I'll have one kid come in and be dating this person, and then when they leave, at the end of the day, they're dating this person. And mind you, none of the communication involved in the entire process happens face to face, even though they're sitting 5 feet away from one another. It's happening over Snapchat or, Instagram chats or text messages or FaceTime, literally sitting right next to one another. And God forbid you leave someone unopened on Snapchat, that's the end of the world, and that's the start of World War III. Everything with these kids happens over social media or on a phone. And I think that, coming up with this app, especially an app for teens, created by teens, catering right to their need. You put it right on the phone. It's something educational that they can look at, keeping it nice and simple to one screen. It's very easy for them to use. And yeah, it's been great.
Eliza, what do you think about ways, we hope the app begins this, but encouraging teenagers to be aware of and self-critical, both of their own relationships and of the relationships their friends are in? Because as we all know, when you're in high school, you live in each other's pocket, especially now. They're in contact constantly. How do we grow that ability to be looking at and thinking about what's happening, and then to be good bystanders or to be assertive for yourself?
Yeah, so there are different steps that you can take as either a friend, kind of looking to help your friend, or teacher or parent. The first is if someone approaches you, if a teen approaches you saying that they feel like they're in an unhealthy relationship or they don't really feel like something's right, the first step is to say, I believe you. Thank you for coming to me. This was a huge step that you came to me. I trust you, and we're going to figure this out. So just letting that teen know that they're not alone, because even though if you're in constant communication, it can seem from the outside like, oh, they must not feel alone. That kind of constant communication, if it's unhealthy, can really cause isolation. So that's the first step. The second is finding those partnerships in your community, finding those resources, doing your homework. So finding the Boys and Girls Club that's like really engaged and ready to jump in, making those connections for your friend or for the teen in schools, really trying to reconnect the teen into the community to make them realize that there's more to the world than just this like really toxic relationship.
And if a teenager comes forward to either of your groups and is reporting that kind of relationship or telling you about somebody else, they're concerned about a friend, what kind of resources are you offering to them? Where are you directing them? How are you going to intervene in that situation?
So for each person, it's different. Everyone's specific needs are totally different. As I mentioned before, we have all sorts of different resources for everyone. So that could start with like a phone call to our hotline, someone kind of wandering in, or if I'm or one of us is at an outreach situation at a school and speaking with teens directly. That could be just kind of walking the person through, like, okay, what are you feeling right now? What are some steps that we can take right now to make you feel a little bit better or to help you plan for your friend? And so creating like a safety plan or an action plan in the moment is really good. And then helping follow through in the moment. So trying to, whatever promises that we make or that a friend makes, making sure to keep them is really spot on. And something that I've really enjoyed recently, kind of going back to the community aspect, is right now I'm running a support group, a girls support group out of the Woburn Memorial High School, funded by the Shannon Lee Mira Foundation. And it's really great for me as an educator to both be able to pass on information in a way that's kind of more intimate and casual, but then also see the girls get to connect with each other and start talking and opening up kind of across different social groups in the high school, and sharing stories of abuse that oftentimes can like resonate with each other.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, one of the biggest aspects about the Boys and Girls Club, there's so many organizations within our communities that do such great work with the kids. But I think one of the things that separates the Boys and Girls Club from other organizations is the meaningful relationships that we build with, or at least try to build with our members. It kind of puts us in a little bit of a different situation with the kids where they might feel a little bit more comfortable coming to one of us and talking about these situations. The most important thing for us is communication all around. Making sure that first of all, before we even get into any type of conversation, they understand obviously we're mandated reporters, and if we feel like they're in danger, the communication is going to go up, not out. Your parents will be involved in making sure that you're safe is number one. But obviously, thank you, for coming and talking to me. Obviously, you're here. You're talking to me. That means you trust me. Obviously, I trust you. Let's figure out something that we can do to make this work and make sure that you're okay.
One of the things we heard from some of the teenagers as we were working on this is that even when they have a relationship or they see a relationship that they're concerned about, they understand that there's some attachment. Even if you don't like certain behavior, there's some attachment to that person in the relationship. And they're often afraid that if they tell anyone, they tell their family, the response is going to be, that's it, we're done. So they tolerate certain behavior because they don't completely want to break off that contact. And what's your recommendation for family members in that circumstance, where your first instinct might very well be to say, that's it, you're never going to see them again, you're never going to talk to them online or in person again?
Yeah, I mean, so like I said in the beginning, a lot of the time the kids are, trying to figure out what a relationship is, what they're supposed to be doing. Oftentimes, I like to, ask very basic questions in the first place. Well, what do you like about this person? What joy do they bring to you? What are some of the good things? Because a lot of times when a teen, will come to talk to me, it's like they do this and they do this, and all like lists of negative things. Well, what happiness do they bring you? Like, trying to figure out, just asking very simple questions, because believe it or not, those very simple questions can, start the thinking process and get, the wheels churning in their heads and say, okay, well, now that you mentioned that, this doesn't make sense. Well, this doesn't make sense. Just talking them through that process, because sometimes it's right in front of them. They just need a little bit of help getting there. So,
kind of from the domestic violence standpoint, most relationship violence follows what we call the cycle of violence. So it can change. It would start off with kind of a tension building phase. So the survivor or the teen might feel like they're walking on eggshells. There's a little bit of tension in the relationship. Eventually that will kind of spike to an explosion, where some sort of abusive event occurs, whether it's physical or emotional. And then it'll oftentimes die down, swing into what we call the honeymoon phase. And so things are kind of back to normal. Everything's great at this point. The abusive partner might be apologizing, promising it'll never happen again. But in this kind of pattern of abuse, it'll swing back into the tension building phase. And so it's important as people who are responding, family members, friends, to recognize that it's not all going to be kind of crisis mode all the time, and it's not all going to be happy, and to meet the teen where they're at and to kind of help them navigate their own way. Because ultimately, when they become adults, they're going to have to start figuring these relationships out for themselves. And so building these strong tools of identifying these patterns is really, really crucial, and opening up those conversations with something as simple as, how are you feeling? What can I do to help?
And in terms of what facilitates that conversation, you mentioned the support group where you've got young women talking together. What about the young men? Is it just as important that we be offering those kind of programs to them?
Absolutely. So whatever programs we run for the boys that we run for the girls. So, just like we have girls groups, we have boys groups. They meet obviously different times of the week, and there's different topics that we talk about with the different groups. But we try to make sure that we have as many resources available to all of our members as we can. We have stuff posted in our teen rooms. We have groups that we run. We obviously have both female and male mentors available at all times to these kids. So we really try to treat it as one, and just make sure that they have as many resources available to them as possible.
And what about the education of folks about being just good bystanders? Like, what kind of resources do we need to be offering kids about that, so that they know to, many times, when something terrible has happened, there are lots of people who then say, well, I saw this, or I knew that. How important is it that people are coming forward with that kind of information?
Yeah, I mean, the bystander effect is really real. So everyone kind of thinks like, oh, someone else will jump in. Like, it's not my place to really, stick my nose into it. But, if you see someone hurting, it is your place to at least check in with the person. You don't have to, file a huge report or, make a big deal, but check in with the person. That's the kind of community building that we want to see throughout our country. And so it can start with those little questions. And in terms of education, really making sure that people feel comfortable coming into uncomfortable situations and offering love, offering support. It can be really challenging to just kind of like step into something that might feel like it's not your business, but ultimately a healthier relationship here is going to breed a healthier relationship here, and it should spread.
Yeah, I mean, I would tell our kids, if you're concerned about a loved one or a friend, and you think you should be doing something, chances are you should be doing something, and never hesitate on that. The bystander effect literally can be the difference between, someone being hurt and, them getting the help that they need. And, we try to educate these kids as best as we can, that way, the bystanders are just as educated as the people going through it. So that way, it's kind of like a circle, and, everyone can help one another, but it's very, very important, crucial. If you see something, make sure you at least talk to the person, and go to a mentor that you trust or someone that you trust, and get advice on what to do next. It's very, very important.
So you talked a little bit, Joey, earlier about seeing these questions coming up in relationships, seventh graders.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure we always think about kids at that age as being in relationships or having this dating life. But for parents and for family members, when do we want them to start having those conversations with their kids?
As early as you can. The more educated these kids can get, the better. Now, I'm not saying you go through everything and anything, but these kids are starting to go through these things at a younger and younger age, and it's important that they're educated. Even if they're not going through it, at least they know what to do in case some of these things happen, as young as they can.
And Eliza, tips for sort of how to break that ice and start those conversations?
Yeah, so those can be the most awkward conversation. It's like the sex talk, you don't want to necessarily have it, but it's really, really important. So just meeting your kid where they're at, or meeting your friend where they're at. So make sure that it's in a comfortable place. You might be doing an activity that you
Like
both
driving.
enjoy, like driving.
Always a good,
like driving, or
you're both looking straight ahead and no one's talking. Yeah.
chopping onions together, something like that. So engage in an activity so that if there are moments of kind of quiet, it doesn't feel awkward or kind of like you're sitting down and having this like monumental conversation. And then starting out small, like, how are your friends? How are your how are your other relationships? Is anyone else in your friend group dating? Like, has that started to be a thing yet? And then going small. So with any sort of education of kids about relationships, friend relationships too, those can have some of the seeds of the toxic behaviors that can then spread to dating relationships. So talking with your teen or your child about those friend relationships too and how those are going can really help set the stage for healthier dating relationships. And then just not being afraid to kind of get your hands dirty. Like if your kid wants to start talking, just go for it. And if you're uncomfortable, you can label that. Say like, hey, this isn't like the easiest conversation for me, but I just want to make sure you're okay, and this is coming from a place of love.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I want to thank our guests today. I've enjoyed this conversation with Eliza and with Joey, and thank you for being with us. As I mentioned, our app, which is Healthy Heart Matters, is available in the App Store for Apple devices, and we're hoping that it provides some good information to our teenagers and also sparks some good conversations at home. So thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you again on another episode of Middlesex Updates. Thank you.